There is a moment near the end of Book 3 when Katara stands in the pouring rain, water hanging around her in long needles of ice, in front of the man who killed her mother. She has tracked him across the world. She has every reason, and then the needles fall and she walks away. That moment, more than any duel, more than any final battle, is the whole argument of who Katara is, and almost nobody talks about it as a philosophical statement. Tonight we are going slowly through her philosophy, not the bending, not the romance, but the way she actually thinks about people and pain and what you do with the worst thing that ever happened to you. So settle in, turn the lights down low, and if you have not subscribed to Ember yet, it genuinely does help us keep making these. I'm glad you're here. Let us begin where she begins, with water. If you want to understand how Katara thinks, you start with the element she grew up beside, because everything she believes about people seems to come from the same place she learned to bend. Water in the show is described again and again as the element of change, the element that adapts and endures, that wears stone down by patience rather than force. The line is repeated by different characters in different ways across the series. The idea that the strength of water is not in striking but in flowing, in being soft enough to find the crack and constant enough to widen it. And it is worth pausing on the fact that this is the philosophy Katara is raised inside before she has any conscious philosophy at all. She is born into a culture whose entire metaphor for power is patience. The south she comes from is not, in the early episodes, a place of great waterbenders. By the time you meet her in the very first episode of the show, the village has been hollowed out by raids, her grandmother is the elder, and Katara is the only waterbender left. She has no master, no scrolls, no school. She has only the element itself and the stubborn instinct that she belongs to it. That stubbornness is the first principle of her philosophy, and you can hear it long before she ever says it out loud. The argument the show is making, read carefully, is that she does not learn patience because she is calm. She is anything but calm. She is one of the most passionate characters in the entire series. She learns patience because she has to, because the people she loves keep being taken from her, and the only thing that has not been taken is the element under her hands. Water teaches her that loss is not the end of motion. Ice melts, rivers reroute, the sea returns. There is a reason her grief, all through the series, never makes her cold. It makes her, if anything, more fluid, more able to enter another person's pain and hold it for a moment, then move on. The philosophy of water, as the show frames it, is not detachment. It is the opposite. It is the willingness to be moved. The next thing to understand about Katara is that her central principle, the one she will not give up no matter what is done to her, is hope. And hope, in her hands, is not a feeling. It is a discipline. There is an episode in Book 2, often pointed to by fans as the emotional core of her early arc, where she walks into the swamp and is shown a vision of her mother, and the swamp benders make their case that everything is one tree, and that time and death are illusions. The episode is, in fan readings, the place where the case for letting go is put to her most clearly. She will not accept it. She will not let go of her mother. She will not let go of her father. She will not let go of the idea that the world can be better than it currently is. The show frames this not as naivety, but as a kind of moral labor, the labor of refusing to let despair do its quiet work on you. Read this way, Katara's hope is not the soft, sunny thing the word usually implies. It is something closer to a vow. It is the decision, made over and over, to keep believing that people can change, that the war can end, that the Avatar can save the world, even when the Avatar himself is a frightened 12-year-old boy still learning to bend 3 elements. The show implies, again and again, that without that vow, there is no expedition north, there is no rescue of Aang at the North Pole, there is no journey to find a firebending teacher, there is no last stand on the day of the comet. Almost every turn in the plot pivots at some point on Katara deciding to keep going when there is no obvious reason to. And that, before anything else she does, is her ethics. She practices hope the way other people practice a martial art. She does it daily, she does it when it is hard, she does it especially when it is hard. The show is quietly insistent that this is what makes her the moral spine of the group. The plot needs Aang to save the world. It needs Katara to keep the rest of them human while he does it. That hope, in turn, is rooted in something more specific, and you cannot talk about Katara's philosophy without spending a long time inside the memory of her mother. Kaya, her mother, dies in a Fire Nation raid on the Southern Water Tribe when Katara is very young. The series shows this in flashback, and it shows what she did, which was to step forward and say that she was the last waterbender in the tribe in order to protect the daughter who actually was. That is the inheritance Katara is working with. Her mother died for her specifically by lying about who she was. The show does not need to spell out what that does to a child. It shows it instead in the way Katara carries other people. She mothers the group. She mothers her brother, even though they are close in age. She mothers Aang from almost the moment she pulls him out of the iceberg. She mothers Toph in her own bristling way. She mothers Zuko by the end in a way that surprises both of them. Fans have written a great deal about this, sometimes in frustration that the show flattens her into the mom of the group, and there is a real and fair criticism in that reading. But there is also a deeper reading, and the deeper reading is that Katara has decided, very young, that the thing her mother did for her cannot be allowed to be a one-off. It has to become a pattern. The way you honor the person who stepped forward for you is by stepping forward for the next person. Her philosophy of love is shaped in this view by a debt she can never repay to the person who is no longer there to receive it. So she repays it sideways by paying it forward again and again to anyone who needs it. That is why she cannot walk past a hungry village in Book 3. That is why she puts herself between Aang and danger so many times you lose count. That is why, in the show's framing, she is the one who carries the spirit water all the way from the North Pole, just in case. She is operating the whole time on an ethic of stepping forward, learned from a woman she barely got to know. And the quiet tragedy of her arc, read this way, is that the ethic costs her. It costs her sleep. It costs her ease. It costs her at times her own ability to ask anyone to take care of her. You see that cost most clearly in her relationship with healing, because healing is the other half of her bending, and it is rarely treated as the more important half by fans, even though the show makes a careful case that it is. In the north, when Master Pakku is finally teaching her, the women of the Northern Water Tribe are restricted to the healing huts. Combat waterbending is for men. Katara famously refuses this. She fights Pakku in front of the whole tribe, and she fights him well enough that he reconsiders. That scene is rightly remembered as a moment of feminist defiance in a children's show that did not have to be that brave. But what is often missed in the celebration of that scene is what she does next. She does not abandon healing. She learns it anyway. She learns it well. She becomes, by the end of the series, one of the most accomplished healers shown anywhere in the franchise. She carries that knowledge with her into every fight. The argument she is making by doing both is one of the quieter philosophical statements in the show. She is saying that the choice between healing and fighting is a false choice. She is saying that a person who can do both has obligations. A person who can only do one does not have. She is refusing the idea that compassion is a softer or lesser branch of power. Read this way, her insistence on healing is not the sentimental side of her. It is the rigorous side. It is the part of her that says, yes, I can fight. But the fighting only matters if there is also somebody putting the world back together afterwards, and if no one else is going to do that work, I will. That is a philosophy. That is a serious, considered, almost unfashionable philosophy in a story full of duels. And the show, to its credit, never lets her abandon it, not even when the stakes are at their highest. Sit with the healing for a while longer, because the way the show treats it tells you a lot about how it wants you to read Katara herself. Healing in the world of Avatar is a specifically Water Tribe art, and within the Water Tribes it is, in the early going, gendered. The Northern Water Tribe in particular is shown as a society that has divided water into two paths, the path of breaking and the path of mending, and assigned each to a different group of people. The show does not pretend that this is harmless. It shows the consequences. It shows girls who have been steered away from the part of themselves that could have made them warriors. And then it shows Katara, who refuses both halves of that division, who insists that mending and breaking are the same skill being used differently. There is a very gentle but very pointed argument inside that refusal. It is the argument that a culture which separates compassion from strength produces people who are diminished in both, and that the way to live well, the way to actually be powerful, is to refuse the separation in your own person. Katara, by the end of the show, is somebody who can freeze a man in place and then thaw him out and check whether he is hurt. She is somebody who can take down a Navy ship and then sit on the beach with a child who is afraid of the ocean. Those are not different versions of her. They are the same person. The philosophy at the bottom of it is that power without tenderness is a kind of cowardice, because it has only learned the easy half, And that tenderness without power is a kind of unrealized duty because it has not yet figured out how to defend the things it loves. That is a striking position for a young teenage character in an animated series to be embodying, and it is one of the reasons people return to her years after they first watched the show. She is making an argument adults rarely manage to make as cleanly. You can see her trying out that argument early before she has the language for it. In the very first episode of the show, when she pulls Aang out of the iceberg, she is already taking responsibility for him. She does it almost casually. She does it before she knows what she has done. The show has often been read as Aang's story, and that reading is correct, but it is worth noticing that almost every important door in Aang's life is opened by Katara making a decision on his behalf. She is the one who decides he should come to the village. She is the one who decides, when his identity is revealed, that he is worth defending. She is the one who decides, after the Southern Air Temple, that they are going to find him a waterbending teacher. She is the one who, again and again, picks him up off the floor when he is too tired or too despairing or too overwhelmed to pick himself up. Read sympathetically, this is the same ethic of stepping forward she inherited from her mother, applied to the most consequential person in the world. Read more critically, and a number of fans have read it this way over the years. It is also the beginning of a pattern in which Katara takes responsibility for things that are not strictly hers, and pays for the taking. Both readings can be true at once. The show, I think, wants you to hold both. It wants you to admire her for being the one who is willing, and it also wants you to feel the quiet weight of that willingness, the way it ages her, the way it sometimes leaves her with nobody to lean on. Her philosophy, the show seems to suggest, is correct, but it is not cheap. It costs the person who lives it, and the show is honest enough to show the cost. Once you understand that hope and stepping forward are the spine of her ethics, you can start to see how she handles the question of judgment, because Katara is, contrary to the gentle image of her, a deeply judging person. She has opinions about people. She has fast opinions about people. She decides quickly who can be trusted and who cannot, and she is rarely shy about saying so. Sokka, all through the series, is shown as the planner, the strategist, the one who weighs options. Katara is shown as the one whose moral instinct fires almost instantly. And the show is interested in what that means, both when she is right and when she is wrong. Think of the way she reacts to Jet in Book 1 when she falls for his charm and is willing to overlook a great many warning signs because he is offering her something that looks like the cause she has been waiting for. The show is patient with her in that arc. It lets her be wrong. It lets her feel the shame of being wrong without humiliating her. And then it lets her in later episodes be the one who refuses to forget what Jet had been willing to do, even when Jet himself is trying to be better. That is a complicated philosophical position to hold. It is the position that a person can change and still be accountable, that you can believe in redemption and still refuse to pretend the past did not happen. Katara, in the show, holds that position more firmly than almost any other character. And the most famous example of her holding it, of course, is Zuko. Her arc with Zuko across the whole series is the single longest case study the show gives you of how she thinks about a person changing. From the moment he first appears in the opening minutes of the first episode, hunting them down on his ship, she sees him as the face of the war that took her mother. She does not separate the soldier from the empire. She does not soften her view because he is young or hurt or because his story has not yet been told. She is, in the early going, the harshest moral judge in the cast about him, and the show, very carefully, does not write her as a fool for being harsh. It writes her as somebody whose harshness has been earned by experience. In Book 2, when she and Zuko are trapped under Ba Sing Se together in the Crystal Catacombs, there is a brief, astonishing scene where she comes close to offering him the spirit water, where she comes close to using it on the scar he carries from his father. The show puts her right at the edge of forgiving him. And then it has him choose, in the very next stretch of episodes, to side with Azula. Read this way, the betrayal in Ba Sing Se is not just a plot twist. It is a moral data point. It is the moment when Katara's instinct to give second chances meets the harder evidence that some chances should not yet be given, and her instinct loses. After that, she does not soften about him for a long time. She does not soften about him when he shows up at the Western Air Temple. She does not soften about him when he proves himself with Aang, with Sokka, with Toph. She does not soften about him, in fact, until he agrees to do the one thing nobody else can offer her, which is to help her find the man who killed her mother. The philosophical point the show is making by stretching her forgiveness out this long is that forgiveness is not owed, it is given. And it is given when the giver is ready, not when the asker is sorry. That is a difficult, mature, almost stubborn position to take in a children's show. Most kids' stories rush to forgiveness because forgiveness is supposed to be the good ending. Katara's arc with Zuko refuses that rush. It says instead that the person who was wronged gets to take her time, and that the people around her, including the audience, do not get to pressure her into a reconciliation she has not yet chosen. Slow down here, because the Southern Raiders episode in Book 3 is where her whole philosophy is put under the heaviest pressure the series ever puts it under, and where the show makes its clearest single statement about who she is. Zuko offers to take her to find the man who led the raid that killed her mother. She accepts. They leave the group against Aang's gentle but real objection. Aang, in that episode, argues for forgiveness. He argues for it in a way that is consistent with his own monkly upbringing and his own quite distinct philosophy. He says with real conviction that she should choose the path of letting go. And Katara, in one of the most quoted exchanges in the show, refuses to be told what her own grief should do. She tells him, in effect, that he does not get to lecture her about her mother. The show does not punish her for that refusal. It does not frame her as wrong for going. It lets her go. And then, in the rain, in the dark, after she has tracked the man down, after she has lifted the water around him, after he has knelt in front of her and begged for his life, she does not strike. She lowers her hand. She walks away. When she returns to the group, the words she gives are careful. She tells Aang she did not forgive the man. She tells Zuko in the same scene that she is ready to forgive him. The distinction between those two statements, said in the same breath, is the whole philosophical center of her character. By most readings, what she chose in the rain was not mercy and not forgetfulness. It was something closer to a moral selfhood. She decided that she would not let the man who killed her mother make her into a killer. She would not let him reach forward through the years and shape who she became. That is not forgiveness. The show is very specific about that. It is something else, and it is a thing the show treats as more useful in a way than forgiveness, because it does not require the wrong person to lie about what she feels. She is still furious. She is still grieving. She still believes the man deserves nothing. She just refuses to give him the satisfaction of making her into his mirror. That is the philosophy she walks away with, soaking wet, into the next stretch of the war. Put the Southern Raiders next to the earlier episode in Book 3 known to fans as the Puppetmaster, the one where she meets Hama, because together those two episodes form the most complete philosophical statement Avatar ever makes about a single character. In the Puppetmaster, Katara meets an old woman who turns out to be a Southern Water Tribe waterbender taken prisoner by the Fire Nation generations earlier. Hama has survived by inventing a new and terrible form of bending, the bending of the water inside living bodies, and she has been using it, the episode eventually reveals, to take her revenge on the people of the village where she has been hiding. She insists on teaching it to Katara. What follows is, by some distance, the darkest sequence in the entire original series. At the full moon, Hama bloodbends Sokka and Aang and turns them against each other, and Katara, to stop her, has no choice but to bloodbend Hama in return. Katara is screaming, and she does it, and then she breaks and she sobs. The show does not move on from that lightly, it lets it sit. And the philosophical question the episode asks is the question the Southern Raiders episode then answers. The question is, what do you do when the world has handed you a power you never asked for and never wanted? A power that came out of somebody else's pain and would only be used to make more pain. Hama's answer is, you use it. You become it. You let the wrong that was done to you authorize everything you do next. Katara's answer, over the course of those two episodes, is no. She refuses Hama's answer. She accepts that she has the ability. She accepts that she will carry the memory of having done it, but she refuses to let it become part of how she lives. Bloodbending, in her philosophy, is not just a banned technique. It is a moral test. It is the thing she was forced to learn and then has to decide for the rest of her life not to use. And the show treats that ongoing refusal as one of the most quietly heroic things she does. The biggest moments of her arc are not the ones where she uses everything she has. They are the ones where she could and does not. That refusal, read carefully, is also one of the things the show says about power in general. The world of Avatar is full of people with extraordinary abilities, and most of those people are weighing all the time the question of how far they should go. Aang famously will not kill the Fire Lord. Zuko slowly learns to refuse the techniques of his family. Iroh, the most quietly philosophical figure in the show, has built his whole later life around having stopped halfway through a siege he could have won. Katara fits inside that conversation as a slightly different kind of voice. She is not somebody who has always had to restrain herself in the way Aang has. She is somebody who has had to discover, episode by episode, the shape of her own restraint. She is somebody who began the show as a child who had never bent more than a few drops of water, and ended it as somebody who could freeze a man in midair, control his blood if she wanted to, and walk into the heart of the Fire Nation capital on the day of the comet. The growth of her power across 3 books is enormous. The growth of her restraint has to keep up, and the show gently lets you watch her struggle to make it keep up. She is not always graceful, she is sometimes loud, she sometimes uses water in anger and regrets it. The Painted Lady episode in Book 3 is a particularly good case study of all of this. In the Painted Lady episode, she comes across a village being poisoned by a Fire Nation factory upstream, and she cannot, by her own ethics, walk past. The rest of the group needs to keep moving. Aang in particular is worried about the schedule. She cannot. She stays. She dresses secretly in the costume of a local water spirit the villagers tell stories about, and she heals them at night, and she eventually destroys the factory. When the others find out, there is a real argument. Sokka, in particular, is angry because she has lied. She has put the mission at risk. And the show is careful, in that episode, to give both sides their due. Sokka is not wrong. She did lie. She did put them at risk. The argument she makes back, however, is one of the cleanest statements of her ethics in the whole series. She tells them, in effect, that she could not keep walking. That the philosophy of the bigger mission, the philosophy of getting to the Fire Lord, cannot be allowed to swallow the philosophy of helping the village in front of her. If it does, the mission is no longer worth completing. That is a serious philosophical position. It is the position that the means by which you save the world are themselves part of the world you are saving. It is the position that you cannot defer kindness for a single second longer than absolutely necessary, because if you do, kindness becomes a thing you talk about rather than a thing you do. Katara, in that episode, refuses the deferral. And the show, by giving the villagers a clean and visible victory, gently sides with her. The other thing the Painted Lady episode shows, and it is worth pausing on, is the way Katara's philosophy makes use of disguise. She literally puts on the face of a spirit in order to do good without being seen doing it. There is a small but real philosophical claim inside that choice. The claim is that the good she is trying to do is more important than the credit. She is not trying to be famous as the helper, she is trying for the helping itself. And in fact, when she is found out, she is embarrassed, almost shy about it, in a way that fits her larger character. She is not somebody who collects accomplishments. She is somebody who collects relationships. The thing she wants from the world is not glory, but connection. The disguise of the Painted Lady allows her to make connections with people who do not even know it is her, and that, the show suggests, is part of why she takes the risk. She wants the village to be safe. She does not need them to know she is the reason. That is a kind of moral generosity that is easy to miss because it is undramatic, but it is consistent with everything else she does across 3 books. She defends Aang, and she does not need Aang to thank her for it. She protects Sokka, and she does not need him to acknowledge it. She mothers Toph, and Toph is not going to be the kind of person who returns the favor. She accepts all of that. She gives anyway. Her ethic, in the end, has very little use for accounting. If hope is the spine of her philosophy and stepping forward is the body of it, anger is the nerve. Katara is, and this is something fans sometimes overlook, one of the angriest main characters in the show. She is angrier in many scenes than Aang. She is, more often than fans give her credit for, angrier than the people who get more attention for being intense. She is angry in a way that the show does not apologize for. She is angry at the Fire Nation. She is angry at men who underestimate her. She is angry at any version of the world that lets children freeze to death in raids. She is angry at sloppy thinking. She is angry at the comfort of people who have not lost what she has lost. And what is striking is that the show treats her anger as a moral instrument, not a moral failing. When she snaps at Pakku in the Northern Water Tribe, it is because he is denying her the right to learn her own element. When she snaps at Aang in the Southern Raiders episode, it is because he is trying to tell her how to feel about her dead mother. When she snaps at Zuko on the day they decide to track Yan Ra, it is because she has been carrying this rage on her back for years. and no one before him has offered to do anything about it. The show implies, again and again, that her anger is responding to real injuries and pointing at them accurately. Her anger is a kind of perception. It tells her before her conscious mind has caught up where the harm is. And the philosophical claim hidden inside that pattern, the one the show is making more or less openly, is that the moralist who is never angry is somebody who has not noticed enough yet. The world the show describes is too cruel for serenity to be the only available stance. Anger in Katara's hands is what proves she is paying attention. The trick, and you can watch her work on this trick across 3 books, is to be angry without becoming cruel. To let the rage tell you the truth about a situation without letting it tell you what to do about that situation. To use it as a compass and then put it down before you act. That is hard. That is, in fact, one of the hardest things any moral agent has to learn, and the show, at its best, makes you feel how hard it is by letting her fail at it sometimes. She is not always graceful with her anger. She sometimes wounds people she loves with it. But she is, by the end of the series, somebody who has learned how to carry it. And that learning, the daily craftsmanship of a tempered fury, is one of the most underrated parts of her arc. The other thing her anger sits next to in the show is the persistent question of being doubted. And that question deserves its own long chapter, because being doubted is one of the most consistent experiences of Katara's life. She is doubted by her brother, who, especially in the early episodes, treats her bending as something between a hobby and a nuisance. She is doubted by Pakku, who refuses on principle to teach her. She is doubted by the leaders of various villages and towns the group passes through, who assume the boy must be in charge. She is doubted by Toph, who arrives in Book 2 with an open and combative skepticism about almost everything Katara does. She is doubted by enemies who do not see her coming. And in nearly every case, the show writes her response not as offense taken, but as work done. She answers the doubt by performing the thing the doubter said she could not do. Pakku doubts her ability to fight. She fights him. Sokka doubts her ability to lead. She leads. A village doubts her ability to teach. She teaches. The slow, careful accumulation of those moments is part of why she lands, by Book 3, as one of the most quietly authoritative voices in the cast. She has been demonstrating over and over that the gap between what people assume about her and what she can actually do is wide. And the philosophical claim that emerges from that pattern, read carefully, is the claim that authority is earned by repetition, not granted by category. She is not respected because she is a woman or a waterbender or a member of any particular family. She is respected because, over and over, she has put her hand on the situation and changed it. That is a useful and not at all sentimental philosophy of respect. It is the philosophy that says the only person who gets to vouch for your competence is you, and the only way to vouch for your competence is to show it. The show, by letting her get the lesson right early and never letting her forget it, leans heavily on her as the channel through which it makes that argument. Her relationship with Pakku and the Northern Water Tribe deserves a much longer look, because that arc in Book 1 is one of the foundational moments of her philosophy, and one of the moments the show is most quietly proud of. When the group arrives at the Northern Water Tribe, Katara has spent the entire first book waiting to find a master. She has carried that hope, in the very serious sense in which she carries hope, all the way across half the world. She has had the famous waterbending scroll. She has practiced on her own, by lantern light. She has imagined what it would be like to finally be taught by somebody who knew what they were doing. And then she arrives, and the master is a man who refuses to teach her because she is a girl. The show makes that refusal blunt. It does not soften Pakku in his first scenes. It lets him be exactly what he is. An old man whose tradition has told him that some kinds of bending are for some kinds of people, and who has accepted that tradition without much examination. Katara, for her part, is furious. She is not just disappointed. She is morally insulted. She has been told that the thing she has been working towards for a year is not allowed to belong to her. And she fights him. That fight, which fans remember and which the show frames as one of the heroic set pieces of the first book, is interesting philosophically because of what happens after she fights him. She does not win. She gives him a real challenge. She holds her own better than he expected. But she does not, in the strict sense, defeat him. What she does is force him to look at her. He sees, in the course of the duel, that she has carried something across the world he had assumed she could not carry. He sees that her grandmother is the woman he had loved in his youth, recognizing her necklace. And he agrees, in the end, to teach her. The show, by writing the arc this way, makes a small but important philosophical claim. It claims that the path past a closed door is sometimes not the door breaking, but the door being persuaded. It claims that the goal of confrontation, in many cases, is not the defeat of the other person, but the moment when the other person actually sees you. Katara in the Northern Water Tribe does the necessary work of being unignorable. And the work of being unignorable is, the show suggests, one of the central labors of a woman in a world that prefers not to look at her. That arc with Pakku, importantly, does not end with him simply accepting her. He becomes her teacher. He becomes, by book 2, somebody who can hand her on to the next stage of her practice. He becomes, in the comics that follow the series and in the wider canon, one of the figures who helped rebuild the Southern Water Tribe. The show implies, without making a song about it, that the encounter changed him too. That her refusal to be turned away was useful not only for her, but for him. That a tradition that refuses to teach its own daughters is a tradition that has fewer hands to do the next century's work, and that he, even at his age, was capable of being shown that. The philosophical claim is gentle but real. The claim is that you do not give up on the people whose ideas have hurt you, because some of those people can still be shown. Katara, in the way she handles Pakku, does not become his enemy. She makes him a friend. She makes him, by the end, a kind of family. That, again, is unfashionable. It is a hard, generous, almost stubborn position to take, but it is consistent with the rest of her ethics. Her grandmother chose, late in her own life, to start a new life in the South rather than marry Pakku. Katara, learning the story, does not punish Pakku for it. She lets the grown-ups work out the history that is theirs. She just insists that the present she lives in will be a present in which she gets to bend. And the show, by ending that arc with Pakku as her teacher and grandfather figure, makes a quiet point about the way history can be reopened rather than closed. You cannot talk about her ethics without spending real time on her relationship with Sokka, because that relationship is the longest-standing relationship of her life and the one most of her later patterns of love come from. Sokka in the show is her older brother by a couple of years. He is funny, sharp, often anxious about being responsible, and in the early episodes occasionally dismissive of her bending. The show does not pretend they have a clean, untroubled relationship. It shows them argue. It shows them tease each other. It shows him be wrong about her and her be wrong about him. What the show also shows again and again is that the underlying loyalty between them is total. They have lost a mother together. They have, by the time the show begins, lost their father to the war as well, because Hakoda is away with the other men of the tribe. They have, in effect, been raising each other in a half-empty village under the care of their grandmother. And the philosophy that comes out of that childhood, the one Katara seems to operate on in her dealings with Sokka, and that radiates outwards into all her other relationships, is the philosophy that love is not always pretty, but it is always present. She does not ask Sokka to be a better brother before she defends him. She defends him. She does not ask Aang to be ready before she helps him. She helps him. She does not ask Toph to be polite before she accepts her into the group. She accepts her. The philosophy is the philosophy of an open hand. The relationship comes first. The arguments inside the relationship come second. And the relationship does not have to be earned because the relationship is the medium in which the earning becomes possible. That's something she seems to have learned from being Sokka's sister, and it is something she practices so reliably across 3 books that by the end you can almost predict her reaction to a new character before she has it. If someone is hurt, she will help them. If someone is grieving, she will sit with them. If someone is angry, she will be angry with them. The hand opens before the question of whether the hand should be open has been asked. Her relationship with Toph is worth its own look because Toph is the character most directly designed to test Katara's philosophy from the inside. Toph arrives in Book 2 as a younger girl, blind from birth, raised in extreme wealth, who has learned to bend earth by listening to badger moles and who has decided, against her family's wishes, to leave with the group. She is abrasive, she is allergic to softness, she does not want to be mothered, and Katara, of course, mothers her anyway. The friction between them is one of the longest-running sources of comedy and emotion in Book 2 and Book 3. The show plays it for laughs more than once, but it also plays it for something real. Toph is not asking to be cared for. Katara is going to care for her anyway, in part because Katara cannot help it, and in part because Katara believes, on some level, that everybody deserves to be cared for, whether they think they want it or not. That is a riskier philosophical position than it might first appear. It runs the risk of being patronizing. It runs the risk of being suffocating. The show is honest enough to let Toph push back against it, sometimes sharply, and the resolution the show eventually arrives at is not that one of them wins the argument, it is that both of them learn to let the other be who they are. Toph lets Katara fuss, within limits. Katara lets Toph be a wall, within limits. They become, by the end of Book 3, a genuinely tender pair. The philosophy that emerges from their friendship is the philosophy that love can be expressed in different vocabularies, and that part of the labor of loving people, well, is learning their language, not insisting they learn yours. Katara, who is at her most natural when she is caring for somebody, has to learn that some people show care by teasing, by bickering, by being present without saying it. She learns it. The show makes you feel the small triumph of her learning it, and the result is one of the most quietly satisfying friendships in the cast. If Sokka is the relationship that shaped her childhood, and Toph is the relationship that tested her ethics and friendship, then her relationship with Aang is the relationship that shaped her sense of what love itself is and what it costs. Their arc, across 3 books, is told with unusual patience for a children's show. They meet in the very first episode when she pulls him out of the iceberg. They become almost instantly devoted to each other. The romance grows quietly underneath the plot, never the main thing, never far from the surface. And by the final episodes of the series, in the days before and after the comet, the show pays it off. After the war is over, in the closing minutes of the final episode, they share a kiss outside the Jasmine Dragon in Ba Sing Se, and the curtain falls. The comics that follow, and eventually the events of the spin-off series, confirm that they spent their lives together and raised children together. That is, in canon terms, what happens. What is more interesting, philosophically, is the shape of how they get there. Aang, in the show, falls for Katara from almost the first moment they meet, with the unguarded, total devotion of a 12-year-old boy who has just woken up from 100 years of grief. He loves her openly, sometimes embarrassingly, and the show finds humor in the imbalance of it for a while. Katara, for her part, is not in a hurry. She is older than him by about 2 years. She is, more importantly, in a much more complicated emotional position. She is grieving a mother, she is leading a brother, she is, in many ways, already in a kind of caretaker mode by the time the romance becomes possible. And the show lets her take her time. It does not punish her for taking her time. It does not write her as cruel for not returning his feelings immediately. It lets the relationship grow into something that is, on her end, less the dazzle of first love and more the slow recognition that this person, the small bald monk who fell out of the iceberg, has become essential to her in ways she did not expect. By the end of Book 3, the love is mutual, but the road there is long, and the show treats the length of it as part of the love, not an obstacle to it. What the show is implying by writing the romance this way is a fairly serious claim about love itself. The claim is that real love often does not arrive as a thunderbolt. It often arrives slowly in the small dailiness of 2 people choosing each other again and again under conditions of stress. Katara, in the way she eventually arrives at her feelings for Aang, demonstrates this. She does not have a single moment of revelation. She has 100 small ones. The way he listens to her grief about her mother, the way he does not flinch when she is angry, the way he takes seriously her insistence that the village matters, the way he is, despite everything, a profoundly kind person at 12, at 13, at 14. By the time she kisses him outside the Jasmine Dragon, she has watched him become the person he is going to be. And the philosophy that emerges from her side of the romance is the philosophy that love is, in the end, a kind of attention. It is being able to see a person clearly over a long time, and finding that the more clearly you see them, the more you love what you see. That is a very different philosophy of love than the one most adolescent fiction sells. And it is, again, a position the show is unusually patient about letting Katara hold. There is a harder version of the same argument, and it sits underneath her relationship with her father, Hakoda. Hakoda has been gone from the south for most of Katara's life by the time the show begins. He left to fight in the war with the other men when she was very young. She is, in effect, a girl who has been raised without a father in the room. When she finally meets him again in Book 3, the encounter is treated by the show with great care. She is, for a moment, furious with him. She tells him in plain terms that he left, that she was a child, that she needed him and he was not there. He listens, he does not defend himself, he accepts the rebuke. And then, slowly, they make a new relationship. The show, by writing it this way, makes another quiet philosophical claim. It claims that grown-ups owe their children an honest accounting when they have not been there, and that the way through to a real relationship is not to pretend the absence did not happen, but to admit it, and to try to be present going forward. Hakoda does that. Katara accepts it. The relationship reforms. And what is striking is that the same Katara who could not yet forgive Zuko, who would not yet forgive the man who killed her mother, can begin the work of reconciling with her father in something close to real time. Why? The show suggests gently that the difference is the difference between somebody who came to you with an apology and a willingness to be different, and somebody who is still actively being the thing that hurt you. Hakoda is not still hurting her. He is in front of her, ready to be her father again, having spent years in a war he did not start. She can meet him there. That is, again, a hard and considered philosophical position. It is the position that forgiveness, where it is given to the present, not to the past, and that the question to ask of any person seeking it is not what they did, but who they are now. The Zuko of Ba Sing Se was still the boy who would choose his sister over the right thing. The Zuko of the Western Air Temple slowly was not. The Hakoda she finds in Book 3 is not the absent father of her childhood. He is a tired, kind, decent man who failed her and is trying to be honest about it. She can meet that, and she does. Her relationship with her grandmother, Kana, is the third corner of that family triangle, and the show says less about it directly than fans wish. But what it does say is important to her philosophy. Kana is the elder of the village in the south. She is the one who raised Katara and Sokka after their mother died and their father left. She is the woman who, decades earlier, walked away from her arranged marriage to Pakku in the north and traveled across the world to make a new life in the south. The show lets you understand that Katara has been raised by a woman who knew, before her, what it was to refuse a tradition that did not fit her. Read this way: Kana is the original source of the stubbornness Katara turns into a philosophy. The willingness to leave when leaving is the only way to be yourself. The willingness to start over without anybody's permission is not a thing Katara invented from scratch. It is a thing she inherited. The show gives you that inheritance in flashes, in the necklace, in the few brief scenes of the village. But it is there, and it explains a great deal about why, when she meets the same Pakku decades later in the north and is told that she cannot learn, her refusal arrives with such unquestioning weight. She has the woman who left him for a reason inside her. She has the example of a person who already showed her, by example, that you do not have to accept the room you were assigned. Turn for a long stretch to the question of the spirit world, because the show takes its own metaphysics seriously and Katara's philosophy has to fit inside it. The world of Avatar is one in which spirits exist, in which there is a spirit world that the Avatar can travel to, in which water, especially in certain places, has properties that touch on something more than physical. Katara is raised inside a culture that takes that for granted. The Northern Water Tribe holds the moon and the ocean as spirits, and they have names, Tui and La. The death of the moon spirit and of Princess Yue in the finale of Book 1 is treated by the show as a real event with real consequences, and Katara, who is present for it, takes it seriously. She does not, in her philosophy, deny the spirit world. She does not, however, seem to lean on it the way some other characters do. She does not, like Aang, walk into trances. She does not, like Iroh, draw long, quiet lessons from her tea. She accepts the existence of the spirits as a fact about the world she lives in, and gets on with the moral labor in front of her. The show implies, read carefully, that her religious posture is one of inheritance rather than seeking. She is not a skeptic. She is not a mystic. She is somebody who has been told the stories and believes the stories and now needs to figure out how to live inside the world the stories describe. That is, again, a quiet and considered position. It is not the position of a person who is constantly looking for meaning. It is the position of a person who already has meaning and is now working on action. The show does not make her dramatic about her faith. It just lets her have it in the background of everything she does as a kind of weather she lives under. The spirit water she carries from the north is the cleanest example of how that faith functions. After the events of Book 1, she leaves the Northern Water Tribe with a small vial of water from the spirit oasis. Water that has, in the world of the show, healing properties beyond ordinary water. She carries it for many episodes. She thinks about using it on Zuko's scar in the catacombs. She does not. She ends up using it at the close of Book 2 to bring Aang back from the brink after Azula strikes him down in the Avatar state. The way the show treats that sequence is worth slowing down on. She does not know in the moment whether the water will work. She is acting in something close to despair. But she is also acting on a faith that what she was given by the North was given for a reason, and that the moment in front of her is the moment for which she has been carrying it. That is a particular kind of faith. It is not the faith of theology, it is the faith of practice. She believes in the water because she has carried it, and because she has been taught what it is for. And when the moment comes, she trusts it. The philosophical claim hiding underneath that sequence is that faith, in any serious sense, is something that gets practiced long before it gets tested, and that the people who have done the practice are the ones who can do the trust when it counts. Katara, by carrying the water all those weeks, has been doing the practice. She is ready when the test arrives, and the show, by letting the water work, gives her a small and decisive vindication. Yue, whom Katara meets only briefly in the final stretch of Book 1, is a strange and important figure in her philosophy because Yue makes a choice that Katara herself never has to make, and Katara has to live with having watched it. Yue, the princess of the Northern Water Tribe, was given life as an infant by the Moon Spirit, who poured part of itself into her in order to save her from dying. When the Moon Spirit is killed in the Siege of the North, Yue gives that life back. She becomes the moon. She dies, in the show's careful language, as a person, and lives, in the show's even more careful language, as the Moon Spirit. Katara is in the room when it happens. She watches it. And the show, by putting her there, asks her silently what she would have done. The philosophical question Yue raises is the question of sacrificial duty, the question of whether and when a person owes the world their own life. It is not a question Katara answers explicitly. The show does not give her a speech about it, but you can watch through the rest of the series the way she carries the memory of Yue. Whenever she does anything brave, anything in which her own safety is on the line, the precedent is sitting in the background. Yue did the largest thing it is possible to do. Katara, in many smaller ways, refuses to be embarrassed about doing smaller things. She gives herself in small bites all the way through the war. She does not flinch from danger. She does not, when it counts, hold back. And the implied philosophy, the one the show does not say but does show, is that a person who has watched somebody give everything is a person whose definition of enough has been recalibrated for life. Yue did not transform Katara into a self-sacrificing person because Katara was already willing to step forward before they ever met. But Yue gave her a reference point. She gave her the picture of what it can look like at the absolute end to put down your own life for the world. And Katara, the rest of the show, lives in the long, quiet light of that picture. Iroh, the other adult moral figure in the show, is worth comparing to Katara because his philosophy and hers converge from different directions. Iroh is older. He is a man. He has been a soldier, a general, a prince, and a refugee. He has lost a son. He has refused, by the time we meet him, to take part in the war on his nation's terms. His philosophy is one of patience, of tea, of small kindnesses, of the long view. He is famously, in the show, the source of many of its most quoted lines about wisdom and growth. Katara, set against him, is younger, less articulate about her philosophy, sharper in temper, less willing to wait. And yet what they end up agreeing on is striking. Both of them, by the end of the series, are arguing for a version of the same idea, which is that the war has to end without producing more people who think like the people who started it. Iroh argues this through gentleness. Katara argues it through refusal. Iroh argues it in tea shops. Katara argues it in the rain on the way back from Yanra. The arguments meet in the middle. The philosophy they share, in the end, is the philosophy of choosing not to become the thing that hurt you. They get there from different routes, the old man and the young woman, but the destination is the same. And the show, by giving you two people who arrive at the same conviction from completely different lives, makes a very confident claim about it. The claim is that this is not a quirk of personality. It is the correct answer. And the show, by Book 3, is happy for you to know that this is what it thinks. Azula, on the other side of the show, is Katara's clearest shadow. They never meet often, but the few times they do meet are formative. Azula is, in many ways, Katara's mirror inverted. Both are powerful young women with extraordinary natural talent for bending. Both are extremely strong-willed. Both are responsible, in their respective groups, for keeping the boys on schedule. Both are loved by their fathers in ways that have shaped them deeply. The difference, of course, is that Azula's family taught her that power is the only currency that buys safety, and Katara's family, even in its grief, taught her that love is. Azula moves through the world by control. She controls her brother, she controls her friends, she controls her own face. Katara moves through the world by connection. She befriends, she protects, she heals. And the final confrontation between them in the closing minutes of the war is one of the show's most important visual statements about which of those two philosophies actually holds up. They duel at the Fire Nation Palace on the day of Sazan's comet, with Zuko in the background already wounded. Katara wins. The way she wins, however, is not by overpowering Azula. It is by outthinking her. She baits her, freezes her in place, and chains her to a grate, then turns to heal Zuko. The show, by writing the duel that way, makes the philosophical point as clearly as it can. Azula loses because her philosophy of control, in the end, leaves her with nobody to rely on, and her isolation makes her erratic. Katara wins because her philosophy of connection has given her the calm to wait, to plan, to choose her moment. And the very last beat of the duel, the one where she turns from the chained Azula to the wounded Zuko and heals him, is the punctuation. The show is telling you in image that the point of winning was never the winning. It was the people you have left to save. Katara, even at the moment of her greatest tactical victory, is already moving on to the healing. That is her, completely. That is the philosophy in one breath. There is a tactical mind in her, and it is sometimes overlooked because the show often gives Sokka the title of strategist. But Katara is sharper, in her own way, than she gets credit for. The duel with Azula is one example. The way she handles the factory in the Painted Lady episode is another. The way she manages, in Book 3, to disguise the group at various points, the way she calms situations and reads rooms, the way she works the conversation in the Northern Water Tribe to get Pakku to actually meet her eyes, all of these are tactical. She is not impulsive in the way the early episodes can make her seem. She is fast. She is somebody whose moral instinct fires quickly, but her actions, when they come, are usually well chosen. She has the strategist's instinct without the strategist's vocabulary. And the show, by giving her these small visible wins of cleverness, makes a quiet point about the way young women are often labeled emotional when in fact they are calculating just as carefully as anyone else, just with different priorities. Katara is not less rational than Sokka. She is rational about different things. She is calculating about how to make the village safe, how to keep Aang training, how to handle Toph's pride, how to deal with Zuko when he arrives, how to bring her father back into a relationship with his children. The show, by letting her be visibly competent at all of this, makes a small but important argument about the nature of intelligence itself. Intelligence is not only the planning of routes and the buying of supplies, it is also the planning of people. Katara in the show is one of the cleanest planners of people in the cast. The episode in Book 3, known to fans as The Day of Black Sun, which spans 2 parts, is a useful place to watch all of this come together. The invasion plan is Sokka's. The tactical execution belongs largely to him and to the broader allies. But Katara is everywhere in the operation. She is fighting alongside her brother, healing the wounded, keeping the morale of the group, making sure her father is in her line of sight, holding pieces of the operation together while the more visible plan unfolds. The show does not give her a single hero moment in that 2-parter. It does something more interesting. It puts her in the texture of everything that happens, the way she is in the texture of everything the group does. And when the invasion fails, when Aang has not yet defeated the Fire Lord, when they have to flee and split up, she is one of the people who makes the splitting up survivable. She does not panic. She does not blame. She works the situation. That, too, is her ethics in motion. Her philosophy in a crisis is to look around for what is still possible, even when a great deal has stopped being possible. The Day of Black Sun in this reading is not a defeat. It is a portrait of what loss looks like when it is met by people who refuse to be undone by it. Katara in those 2 episodes is one of the people who refuses to be undone. Part of what makes her resilient, though the show does not always foreground it, is her relationship to children specifically. Katara is, all through the series, unusually good with children. She is good with the kids in the Earth Kingdom villages they pass through. She is good with the children in the Fire Nation school. She is good with them even when she is afraid, even when she is tired, even when she has just been in a fight. The show implies, gently, that her experience of having been the child without a mother gives her a particular respect for being small in a world of large and dangerous adults. She does not condescend to children. She listens to them. She takes their questions seriously. She makes promises she keeps. And in those interactions, you see another piece of her ethics in working form. The piece that says that the people without power are not the people you can afford to ignore. They are, in fact, the people you most need to take seriously, because the way you treat them is the truest signal of how you actually feel about the rest of the world. Katara, across 3 books, treats children well. The show, by writing this consistently, is making a moral judgment about her character that it is happy for you to extend to its judgment about her larger philosophy. Watch how she is with the small. That is who she is to the large. You can see the same quality in the way she treats prisoners, which is another underappreciated piece of her ethics. In several episodes, she has the opportunity to mistreat people she has captured. She does not gloat over Pakku when she gains his respect. She does not gloat over Zuko when she captures him in Ba Sing Se. She does not, even in the rain, gloat over Yan Ra. The show, by writing her this way, keeps making the same quiet argument. The argument is that the way you treat the person who is in your power is the way the rest of the world should be able to expect you to behave if they ever find themselves in your power. Katara, in her conduct toward captured enemies, is consistent. She is firm. She is sometimes cold. She is never cruel. She does not, at any point, become the kind of person who finds satisfaction in another person's helplessness. And that, too, is a philosophy. It is the philosophy that says that the moments when nobody is watching are the moments when your ethics actually exist. The rest of the time, you are performing them. But in the dark, alone with somebody you could harm without consequence, you are showing yourself who you are. Katara, in those moments, keeps showing herself the same person over and over. A word about her vulnerability, because for a long time the show seems to be writing her as the strong one and the comforter, the person other people fall apart in front of. That is true as far as it goes, but the show is also careful, in scattered scenes across all 3 books, to let you see her be the one who is comforted. She has small moments of weariness she lets her brother see. She has moments with her grandmother where she lets her years slip and becomes a younger girl again. She has moments with Aang where, in the privacy of the campfire, she lets the mask of the older sister fall, and is just a girl who is tired and frightened and not sure they are going to win. The show, by sprinkling those moments through the series, makes a quiet argument that vulnerability is not the opposite of strength, but a precondition for it. The strong people in the show are not the people who never break. They are the people who break safely, in the company of people who love them, and then put themselves back together and walk on. Katara, in this reading, is strong precisely because she lets herself be small now and then. She does not pretend she is invincible. She knows where her cracks are. She knows who can be trusted with them. And the philosophy that lives in that quiet pattern is the philosophy that the people who can be relied on most heavily in a crisis are usually the people who have learned, before the crisis, how to be honestly held by somebody else. Katara has learned that. She does not parade it, but it is there. And when, in the second half of the show, she becomes the emotional center of gravity for the group, it is because she has done that earlier work. She is not running on borrowed strength. She is running on the strength that comes from having admitted more than once that she is not always strong. The episode in which Aang is struck down by Azula in the catacombs underneath Ba Sing Se is perhaps the moment in which all of this is most tested at once. Azula's lightning catches him in the back at the end of Book 2. He falls. Katara, in the heart of the catacombs, calls a great wave that drives the Fire Nation soldiers back, picks him up out of the water, and gets him out. The show, by writing the scene this way, gives her one of her most physically powerful moments and immediately rebrands it as an act of rescue rather than of conquest. She does not drive Azula off in revenge. She gets the boy she loves out of the room. And then, on Appa, fleeing the city, she does the thing the spirit water was for. She uses it. He breathes. He lives. The show then ends Book 2 on that image, on her holding him as he comes back. And the philosophical content of that ending is, again, very specific. The point of saving the world is to save the people in it, one at a time, starting with the ones in front of you. The point of having power, of having water in your hand, is to do that. Katara, in that final image of Book 2, is the philosophy of the show condensed into a single shot. She is the person who, when everything has gone wrong, does the next available kindness with everything she has. That is what she does. That is who she is. And the show, by ending a season on her doing it, is telling you that this is what it most wants you to remember about her. The recovery of Aang, however, is not the end of the philosophical pressure she is under, because she then has to spend much of Book 3 with the knowledge that he came back at all only because she happened to be carrying the right vial of water at the right moment. She has in effect kept the Avatar alive by the thinnest possible margin. And the show is honest about how that knowledge changes her. She becomes, in Book 3, slightly more anxious about him. She watches him more closely. She is more reluctant to be too far from him for too long. She is, in scattered moments, even sharper with him than she has been before, in the particular sharpness of a person who has nearly lost what they love and now overcorrects to keep it close. The show does not name this dynamic, it just plays it. And the philosophical claim hiding underneath is that you cannot have come that close to losing somebody and not be changed by the near miss. Love that has been almost taken away is heavier than love that has never been touched. Katara, in Book 3, is carrying that heavier love. And the show, by letting her carry it without commentary, gives the audience a chance to feel its weight directly. You see that weight too in the way she handles the Western Air Temple stretch of Book 3 after Zuko has joined the group. The show is honest about how dangerous this is for her. The Western Air Temple episodes are partly about Zuko trying to teach Aang firebending, but they are also, in real terms, about Katara holding the seam in the group together while she works out what she actually thinks of having Zuko there. The famous scene in which she tells him alone that if he steps out of line once she will end him is one of her hardest and most honest scenes in the entire series. She does not perform forgiveness. She does not perform mercy. She tells him exactly what she is feeling. She gives him the rule, and then she goes on with the work. The philosophy in that small private confrontation is the philosophy that trust does not have to be present for cooperation to be possible. You can work with somebody you do not yet trust if you have been honest with them about what the conditions are. Katara, in that scene, sets the conditions. She does not pretend they do not exist. And the rest of Book 3 plays out, in a sense, inside the framework she set in that moment. Zuko, by the end, has earned the lifting of those conditions. But Katara, by saying them aloud, made the earning possible. That is, again, a very practical and very mature philosophical move. It is the move that says that the alternative to faking forgiveness is not breaking the group. It is being clear about where you actually stand and proceeding on the terms of your honesty. Most adults could not do what she does in that scene. Katara, at 14, does it. The Boiling Rock episodes, in which Sokka and Zuko go to rescue Hakoda and Suki from the prison, are episodes she is mostly absent from. But the framing matters. She stays behind, with Aang and Toph, to keep the rest of the operation safe. The show does not make her stay behind because she is the girl. It makes her stay behind because she is the one whose presence is needed somewhere else. That is, in itself, a small structural decision the show makes that says something about her place in the group. She is essential where she is. The rescue mission can run without her. The base camp cannot. And when the rescue party returns, with her father in tow, the reunion is hers. The show, by giving her that reunion, completes a piece of her arc that has been open since the first episode. The man who left the village when she was a child is back. He is back in part because she and her brother went out into the world and made it happen. The implied philosophical claim is that the things we have lost in our childhoods are not always lost forever. Sometimes, with enormous effort, with the help of people who love us, with a great deal of luck, we can do the work of getting some of them back, not all of them. Her mother is not coming back, but her father is. And Katara, by Book 3, has rebuilt a relationship with the parent who is still alive. That is, in its own modest way, a victory. The show treats it as one. There is also, threaded through all of these arcs, the steady question of identity, of what it means to be a Water Tribe woman in a world that has been rearranged by the Fire Nation's 100-year campaign. Katara, in her own life, carries a small number of physical objects that anchor her sense of who she is. Her necklace, in particular, is one of the show's most repeated visual cues. It was made by Pakku for her grandmother decades ago as a betrothal piece. Her grandmother left it behind when she fled to the south. Katara wears it. She wears it through everything. It is taken from her at one point by Zuko in the first book and used to track her. She gets it back. She keeps wearing it. The show, by foregrounding this object so consistently, is making a quiet point about heritage. The point is that the things we wear are not always just decoration. Sometimes they are a piece of a longer story we belong to, and the wearing of them is a way of insisting that we are still part of that story even when the rest of the story has been violently interrupted. Katara, by wearing her grandmother's necklace, is doing a small piece of resistance every day. She is saying that the Southern Water Tribe is not over. She is saying that the line of women her grandmother represents is not over. She is saying that she belongs to a place and a tradition that has not been finished even though it has been damaged. The Fire Nation could destroy her village. It could not destroy what she carries on a string around her neck. That is a philosophy of heritage that does not need to be spoken out loud to be felt. The show lets you feel it just by keeping the necklace in nearly every shot. The same goes, in a different way, for the way she speaks about her people. Katara, in nearly every episode, finds a way to refer to herself as a member of the Southern Water Tribe. She does not blur into the broader category of the water tribes. She does not become a generalized waterbender. She is from a specific place with a specific history, and she names it. She names it when she meets the Northern Water Tribe. She names it when she meets the Earth Kingdom. She names it when she meets the Fire Nation, even when naming it is dangerous. The show, by writing her this way, makes a small point about specificity in identity. The point is that the smaller and more particular your sense of where you come from, the more solid the ground on which you stand. Katara is not from a vague place. She is from a particular village in the south, with a particular grandmother, with a particular cooking method for sea prunes, with a particular set of stories about the war. The world cannot disorient her by misreading her because she is precise about herself. That, again, is a philosophy. It is the philosophy that identity, when it is held in particular detail, becomes a kind of armor. The show, by letting her hold her own particularity tightly, gives her a stability that other characters who are less rooted sometimes lack. Aang, by contrast, is the last of his people. His sense of where he comes from is haunted by absence. Zuko's sense of where he comes from is haunted by his father. Katara's sense of where she comes from is, despite all the loss, intact. And that, the show suggests, is part of why she can carry so much. She knows the ground she is standing on. There is a strange and important moment in the early stretch of Book 3 when the group enters the Fire Nation and has to live there in disguise. They take new names, they wear new clothes, they go to a Fire Nation school, they eat Fire Nation food. The show treats this comedically, especially in the school episode, but underneath the comedy is a serious question about identity, and it is one Katara has to answer in her own way. She is suddenly required in those episodes to perform being somebody she is not. She is required to speak in a way her people do not speak, to bow in a way her people do not bow, to pretend to admire a flag her people have been fighting for a century. And the show, by writing her through these episodes, lets her be playful with the disguise without ever quite letting her forget what is underneath it. She enjoys herself briefly. She lets herself be a normal teenage girl at a normal school dance for the length of one episode. But the philosophy underneath the performance is consistent. She knows who she is. The costume cannot reach the core of her. She's allowed to be in the disguise because the disguise is a tool, not a betrayal. And when the episode ends, she comes out of it whole. The contrast with characters who lose themselves in disguises, who go undercover for too long and forget which side they came from, is implicit. Katara does not lose herself. She just borrows a face for as long as the mission needs it. And the philosophy underneath that, the one the show is making by letting her be playful and still be herself, is the philosophy that the self can survive a great deal of performance without being damaged, as long as the performer knows what the performance is for. That is, again, a mature position. It is not a position most adolescent characters get to occupy. The show lets her occupy it. The school dance in that episode is also one of the few moments the show pauses to let her be a kid. She dances with Aang. The rest of the room joins in. The Fire Nation children, none of whom know who they really are, laugh and dance with them. And the philosophical claim hidden in that scene, gentle as it is that the people on the other side of a war are mostly just people. The Fire Nation kids at that school are not monsters. They are children who happen to have been told certain stories about the world. Some of them are cruel, most of them are not. Katara in that scene lets herself be seen by a room full of people from the nation that killed her mother, and she lets them dance with her. That is a hard, surprising kind of generosity. It is the generosity of somebody who refuses to let the political category of the people in the room overwrite the human category. They are children. She is a child. There is music. So they dance. The show, by giving her that scene, makes a small but clean argument about the moral basis of any future peace. Peace, the show implies, will be built on moments like this one, on the willingness of people who have been told to hate each other to look up and see each other instead. Katara, by being willing to dance, does her share of that work. Her relationship with teaching, both as student and as teacher, is another long thread of her philosophy. She was Aang's first waterbending teacher in the early episodes, before Pakku ever entered the picture. She taught him what little she knew. She made mistakes. She got frustrated. He got frustrated. They argued. The show, by writing those early scenes the way it does, makes a small but important claim about the way knowledge is passed between people. The claim is that teaching is not a clean transmission. It is not the wise master pouring the right form into the empty student. It is two people, both of them imperfect, trying to figure out together how something works. Katara, as Aang's first teacher, is not yet a master. She is a beginner who is one step ahead of him. And the show treats that as enough. She does not need to be perfect to be helpful. She needs to be willing to try. She needs to be willing to be patient. She needs to be willing to admit when she does not know. The philosophy underneath that, again, is generous. It is the philosophy that the people who can teach you something are not always the people who know the most. They are often just the people who are a step or two further down the road than you are. Katara in the early episodes is that person for Aang. She is also, by extension, that person for everyone she ends up teaching across her life, including the people she will teach long after the war is over. When Pakku takes over Aang's waterbending instruction in the Northern Water Tribe, Katara is also his student. She trains alongside him, and the show is careful to let her keep her teacher role even as she takes on the student role. She does not stop helping Aang. She does not become his rival. She helps him keep up. She corrects him on the side. She takes Pakku's criticism and turns it into useful guidance for the boy she has been carrying since the iceberg. The way she balances being a student and being a teacher in that stretch is one of the small competencies the show gives her without showing off about it. It is, again, a tactical thing. It is also, in its quiet way, a philosophical thing. The philosophy is that you do not stop being able to teach somebody just because you are also being taught, and that the appearance of learning, the visible humility of being a student, can in fact deepen the teaching because the student you are helping sees that you are still learning too and that learning is not, therefore, shameful or finite. Katara teaches Aang in many ways by visibly going on being a student herself. That is one of the truest pieces of teaching philosophy in the show, and it is buried in the texture of the Northern Water Tribe arc rather than spelled out anywhere. The Siege of the North, which closes Book 1, is a useful long look at her in extremis because it is the first time she is part of a real, large-scale military engagement. The Fire Nation has come for the moon. The city is under attack. The combined forces of the Northern Water Tribe are fighting on the canals and the walls. And Katara, in those episodes, is everywhere. She is fighting alongside the city's bending masters. She is protecting Aang. She is making sure Sokka is not killed. She is, briefly, in the Spirit Oasis, trying to keep the moon and ocean spirits alive. She is the one, when Princess Yui dies, who is closest to the loss. The show, by writing her this way, makes one of its most quietly insistent points. The point is that war, in this universe, is not won by a single hero making a single grand move. It is won by 1,000 small acts of competence and courage, done by people whose names mostly do not get remembered. Katara in the Siege of the North is not the Avatar. She is not the strategist. She is not even the bending master. She is a competent young waterbender doing whatever the moment in front of her requires. And the show treats that, very deliberately, as heroic. It does not give her a single big scene in the siege. It gives her the whole event, all the small contributions, the thread of presence through the battle. That, too, is a philosophy. It is the philosophy that the world is held together in any actual war by people exactly like her, who do the next available competent thing for as long as it takes. The Avatar finishes the story. Katara is one of the people who make sure there is a story left to finish. The show is honest enough to let her be wrong sometimes, and that too is worth saying, because her ethical instincts are not always universally vindicated. She is wrong about Jet in the early going, at least in part. She is, in different ways and in different episodes, wrong about characters she trusts too quickly or distrusts too quickly. She is wrong briefly about Zuko in the catacombs in a way the show is then willing to walk back from. The show, by letting her be wrong, refuses the temptation to make her a moral oracle. She is not always right. She is, however, always trying. And the philosophy that emerges from her being allowed to be wrong is the philosophy that ethical seriousness does not require infallibility, only persistence. You can be wrong about a person and still hold the right principles. You can be wrong about a situation and still be working from the right place. The wrongness is not the disqualifier. The willingness to keep trying after the wrongness, to revise, to apologize where apology is owed, is the marker of an actual ethical agent. Katara in this reading qualifies on that count. She does not pretend not to have been wrong. She just keeps going with the new information more carefully than before. That is again a more mature position than her age would suggest. And the show, by quietly letting her have it, gives the audience a model for what ethical seriousness actually looks like under conditions of imperfection. There are quieter scenes worth pausing on. There is a scene late in Book 2, after the catacombs, on Appa, where Katara is keeping Aang alive in her arms. There is a scene in Book 3, on the beach, where she sits with Toph and braids her hair. There is a scene in the back of a cart, in disguise, where she leans her head briefly on her brother's shoulder. There is the long, quiet scene in the final episode where she stands with Aang outside the Jasmine Dragon as the sun sets. The show, in these moments, refuses to treat her only as the woman of action. It lets her be tired, it lets her be tender, it lets her hold somebody else without needing the holding to be a plot point. The philosophy underneath those quiet scenes is the philosophy of presence. It is the philosophy that the work of being a person is not always loud, that sometimes it is the simple decision to be in the room with somebody who needs you in the room. Katara is unusually good at the simple decision to be in the room. The show, by writing her with this many quiet moments, is making the same argument over and over. The argument is that the people who can do the big things are the people who have been practicing the small things by candlelight on long nights with whoever else is in the room. Katara, by the time the war is over, has been doing those small things for years. The big things, when they arrive, do not come out of nowhere. They come out of the long, quiet practice. The final stretch of the series, the 4-part finale of Book 3, gives her one of the largest stages she has ever been given, and the way the writers use it tells you a great deal about how they understood her. The group splits up for the final battle. Aang goes to confront the Fire Lord alone. Toph, Sokka, and Suki go to deal with the airships. Zuko and Katara go to confront Azula at the Fire Nation Palace, where Azula is about to be crowned Fire Lord. The pairing of Zuko and Katara for this confrontation is, in itself, a deliberate writing decision. The two of them, by the end of Book 3, have traveled the longest distance together in moral terms. He has been her enemy. He has been her almost ally. He has been her betrayer. He has been the man who took her to find her mother's killer. He has been the person who tried to teach Aang the element he most needed. By the time they walk into the courtyard at the palace, they are something close to siblings. The show, by giving them the final duel together, is treating their relationship as one of the central friendships of the entire series, even though it took nearly the whole run to get there. And the philosophical point of that pairing is, again, consistent with everything else. The point is that the people who can be most trusted at the end are not always the people who could be trusted at the beginning. The people who become trustworthy through a slow and visible process of becoming a different person are in some ways more reliable than the people who are always reliable because they have had to choose in front of you to be the version of themselves that you trust. Zuko has done that choosing. Katara, by walking into the courtyard with him, has acknowledged it. The duel itself, the one between Azula and the pair of them, plays out in a particular way that fans have spent years analyzing. Zuko, in the most famous beat, takes a lightning bolt for Katara. He throws himself in front of it, redirecting it as he was taught. But the redirection is imperfect, and he is hurt. He falls. Azula advances on Katara. Katara has to fight Azula alone. The way the duel ends, as we have already said, is by Katara baiting Azula into a position where she can be chained, freezing her in place, and then turning to heal Zuko. What the show is doing in that whole sequence is making a series of small but decisive philosophical claims about what each of these characters is for. Zuko is for protecting Katara because his arc has been about learning to protect rather than to dominate. Katara is for fighting Azula because her arc has been about learning how to fight without becoming what she is fighting. Azula loses because her arc has been about not learning. Each character does the thing their philosophy has been preparing them to do. And the show, by writing the sequence this way, gives Katara the win that, in some sense, she has been earning since the very first episode. She is the one who freezes the heir to the empire that killed her mother. She does it without killing her. She does it without humiliating her further than the situation requires. And then she does the very next available act of healing on her friend with the water she has spent her life learning to use. It is, in narrative terms, a complete sentence. The character has been doing this for 3 books. In the final pages, she does it one more time, perfectly, and the war ends. The aftermath of the war in the closing minutes of the series is brief but considered. Aang is hailed as the Avatar who ended the war. Zuko is crowned Fire Lord. The group returns to Ba Sing Se to the tea shop Iroh has opened. There is laughter, music, the warm light of a place that has not been at war in centuries. And outside, on the balcony, Katara and Aang share their kiss. The show ends. What is important, for the purposes of her philosophy, is what is implied by the ending. The implication is that the kiss is not a beginning so much as an arrival. It is a surface form of a thing that has been growing for 3 years. It is, in the language of the show, the recognition of the love that has been there the whole time. Katara, by being the one who initiates that kiss, is doing one final act in keeping with the philosophy we have been tracing. She is naming a relationship she has been ready to name. She is not waiting for permission. She is not deferring her own want to anybody else's schedule. She is, in the privacy of a balcony in Ba Sing Se, taking the small action that finishes the larger story. And the show, by giving her that action and then cutting to black, treats it as the most ordinary and most extraordinary thing in the world. She is 14 years old. She has saved a village and a city and arguably a world. And the last thing she does is kiss a boy she loves on a quiet evening. That, again, is a philosophy. It is the philosophy that the point of all the work was the chance to have ordinary tenderness at the end of it. The war ends so that the rest of life can begin. Katara, by ending her arc with the small act of love rather than the large act of war, embodies that point as cleanly as any character ever has. Beyond the original series, the story continues in the comics, which are part of the wider canon but are a different medium with different writing teams, and it is worth being careful with how we frame what they show. In the comics that follow the war, Katara is involved in the politics of rebuilding the world. The Southern Water Tribe is one of the regions that needs rebuilding most. Her father's involved in that work. She is involved in it. Pakku, by then her grandfather figure, is involved as well. The comics show her negotiating, mediating, fighting where she has to, building where she can. The comics also begin to show the slow knitting of her relationship with Aang into something that will eventually become a life together. The philosophy she carries through these comics is consistent with the one we have been tracing. She continues to step forward. She continues to refuse to abandon people. She continues to insist that the war did not end so that the world could become a slightly different version of the same hierarchies. She continues, in short, to be who she was in the show. The comics, where they add to her, mostly add by extending her in time. They do not radically rewrite who she is. And for our purposes, the important thing is that the philosophy holds. The Katara of the comics is recognizably the Katara of Book 3, doing the next available work for the world she helped to save. The other body of canon worth flagging, very carefully, is the sequel series Legend of Korra, which is set decades after the original show and which features Katara as an elderly woman. The Korra material is its own thing, written by some of the same people but in a different register and with different concerns, and for the purposes of describing her philosophy, we should treat what it gives us as a coda rather than as the main text. In Korra, Katara is old. She is still in the Southern Water Tribe. She is, in the show, the master who helps Korra learn waterbending and healing. She is the widow of Aang, who has died at some point before the series begins. She is the mother of 3 children, by most accounts 2 of whom, Bumi and Kaya, are introduced in that series, and one of whom, Tenzin, becomes one of the central figures of Korra's story. The shape of her life, as Legend of Korra shows it, is consistent with the philosophy we have been tracing. She did the work, she raised the children, she taught the new generation, she kept the Southern Water Tribe alive as a place. She continued into old age to be a healer. And when Korra arrives at her door, she does what she had spent her life doing, which was to take in a young person who needed her and to teach her with patience what she knew. The philosophical claim implicit in showing us the old version of her is the claim that the philosophy did hold. It was not a phase of her teens, it was a way of living. She kept it. It kept her. The show treats her as an elder whose authority is earned, whose kindness is undimmed, whose grief, where it appears, is honest. She has lost her husband, she has lost friends, she has had to watch a new world rise up that does not always remember the old one accurately. And she meets all of that with the same combination of warmth and clear sight she had when she was 14. That, again, is a philosophy. It is the philosophy that has been the center of who she is the whole time. Be clear that some of what fans speculate about her old age in the Korra era goes beyond what the canon actually shows. The exact nature of her marriage to Aang, the texture of her years of widowhood, the politics of her later relationship with her children are mostly off-screen. Anything written about those details that goes beyond what Legend of Korra explicitly depicts should be treated as fan extension rather than canon. Nothing official confirms many of the more elaborate readings of her later life. The show, in its restraint, gives us only a few scenes of her old age, and those scenes are enough to establish the shape of the philosophy without filling in the corners. For our purposes, the corners do not need to be filled in. The shape is the point. The deeper question, the one that keeps returning, is what Katara's whole philosophy is for. Not how it works, not what it looks like in any individual episode, but what its overall purpose is. And the answer the show seems to want you to arrive at by the end of the run is that her philosophy is for the work of making a world worth living in after the work of fighting for the world is done. There are characters in the show whose job is to win the war. The Avatar's job is to win the war. The General's job is to win the war. The Princess's job is to win the war. There is also, the show insists, a different job, which is the job of keeping the world soft enough to be inhabited even while it is being fought over. That job is Katara's job. It is also, the show suggests, going to be the job that matters most when the war ends. The world that comes after the comet will be a world full of widows, of orphans, of refugees, of people who have lost their land and their people and their certainty about themselves. That world will need somebody who knows how to step into a strange village and feel the weather of the place and start to help. It will need somebody who can sit with a child and not flinch. It will need somebody who can teach a young person how to bend water without making the lesson smaller than it is. Katara, by Book 3, is that somebody. And the philosophical claim the show is making is that this somebody is, in the long run, more important than the warrior who finishes the duel. The duel takes a day. The rebuilding takes a century. Katara is the one the world will need for the century. The show, by spending 3 books showing you how she gets ready for that, is making a serious case for her as the moral center of its universe. That centrality has not always been recognized by the show's own narrative emphasis, and a fair number of fans over the years have pointed out that the writers occasionally underuse her, especially in certain late Book 3 episodes, where her own emotional arcs get less screen time than they might have. The criticism is real. It is not the same, however, as the criticism that her philosophy is shallow or that her characterization is incomplete. Where the show falls short of her is a question of allocation, not of conception. The Katara who exists on the page is a thoroughly thought-through person with a coherent and serious ethics. The Katara who sometimes does not get her own beat in a given finale is the result of a show with too many characters to do all of them complete justice. The fans who have argued for her over the years, who have written essays about her arc, who have rewatched the Southern Raiders episode hoping to find new things in it, have generally been right that the underlying character can carry more weight than the show always gave her room to carry. And the experience of revisiting her, in the slower way an essay like this one tries to do, tends to bear that out. There is more in her than the show always had time for. The philosophy is more developed than the screen time suggests. Going back and looking at her carefully reveals her again and again as one of the most considered moral agents the show has. The question of hospitality is one of the most quietly persistent themes of her behavior, and it deserves a long look because it ties together a number of the threads we have been tracing. Across the entire series, Katara is the character most reliably invested in the idea that the group eats together, that the group rests together, that the group has a roof over its head when a roof is available, and that the people they meet on the road have the same basic decencies extended to them. She is the one who, again and again, takes on the cooking. She's the one who, when the group arrives somewhere new, tries to make friends with the local people before she does anything else. She is the one who, when a stranger needs help, slows the group down to give it. Her brother teases her for this. Toph rolls her eyes at it. Aang is grateful for it without always understanding it. The philosophy underneath that pattern of behavior is the philosophy that the world is held together at the most basic level by people who feed each other. It is a philosophy with a long, real-world history. It is the philosophy of every culture that takes the obligation of the host seriously. And the show, by writing her this way, makes a small but important claim about the political. The claim is that hospitality, the simple act of sharing what you have with the person in front of you, is not a soft skill or a feminine domain or a marginal concern. It is the basic infrastructure of any civilization worth having. Without it, the war never really ends because the conditions that produce war keep being reproduced by people who do not feel obligated to each other. With it, the slow, long peace becomes possible. Katara, by being relentlessly hospitable, is doing one of the most political things any character in the show does. She is rehearsing in miniature the peace they are all trying to win. The episode in Book 3 involving Hama, which we have already discussed in connection with bloodbending, is also a brilliant case study of hospitality going wrong. Hama, when they first meet her, presents herself as a kind old innkeeper. She invites them in. She gives them food, she offers them rooms. She is, on the surface, doing exactly the thing Katara herself believes in most. And it turns out, of course, that her hospitality is a trap. She is luring them in for her own reasons. The horror of the Hama episode, philosophically, is that it is the dark mirror of the philosophy Katara has built her life around. It is what hospitality looks like when it is performed by somebody whose grief has consumed her ability to actually be hospitable. Hama makes the soup, she lays the table, she opens the door, and all of it is a lie. And the show, by writing the episode this way, makes Katara confront, for the first time, the question of what her own philosophy could become if it ever soured. Hama is who she could become. Hama is what happens when a southern water tribe waterbender who has lost everything decides that the loss authorizes any response. Hama is what happens when the ethic of stepping forward gets warped into the ethic of taking back. The episode is, for that reason, one of the most personally challenging Katara faces. It is not a fight she can win by being a better bender. It is a fight she can only win by being a different kind of person than the woman in front of her. And she does. She wins it by being a different kind of person. She does what the moment forces her to do, to save Sokka and Aang. And then she puts the technique down and walks away and refuses to become Hama in the longer arc of her life. The Hama episode, for these reasons, is not just a horror episode. It is a philosophical interrogation of the protagonist, and the protagonist, by the end, has held up. You can read the rest of Book 3, in a sense, as a slow continuation of that interrogation. Every episode, in some way, is testing whether Katara will hold her position. The Painted Lady episode tests her by offering the easy excuse of the larger mission. She holds. The Fire Nation School episode tests her by offering the comfort of being just another teenager. She holds. The Boiling Rock arc tests her by removing her brother and her father from her, leaving her in charge of the camp. She holds. The Southern Raiders episode tests her by giving her the man who killed her mother under her hand. She holds. The final battle tests her by giving her Azula. She holds. By the end of Book 3, the show has run her through, by my count, every major version of the moral test it knows how to write. And she has come out the other side of all of them recognizably herself. That is, in a written character, a real achievement. It is the achievement of a writing room that knew what their character believed and was willing to test that belief honestly. It is also the philosophical case for the character. She is who she says she is. The show is willing to put her under pressure to demonstrate it. The pressure does not break her. The pressure clarifies her. There is something to be said, finally, about the way her philosophy handles grief, because grief is the medium in which most of her ethical decisions take place. She is grieving at some level throughout the whole series. She is grieving her mother. She is grieving her village. She is grieving in different ways. The friends she has lost, the people she has watched die, the parts of her childhood she did not get to have. The show treats this grief as a fact about her, not as a problem to be solved. It does not try to write the grief out of her by the end of the series. It does not give her closure in a tidy way. It lets the grief sit in the background of her, even at her happiest moments. The kiss with Aang at the Jasmine Dragon is not a kiss that has erased her mother from her mind. It is a kiss that is happening at the same time as her mother's absence. The two facts coexist, and the philosophical claim hiding underneath that coexistence is one of the most adult things the show says about anything. The claim is that grief is not a thing you finish. It is a thing you carry. It does not lift. It does not resolve. It becomes part of the furniture of the self, and the self learns to walk around it. The The person who is grieving learns to be a person who is grieving. That is what living looks like for somebody who has actually lost something serious. And Katara, by going on after every loss, by continuing to laugh and to dance and to kiss and to fight, even though her mother is still not coming back, demonstrates the only kind of recovery actually available to people in her position. She does not get over it. She gets on with it. The going on is the recovery. The going on is the philosophy. There is also a small but important thread of her philosophy that concerns the natural world, and it is worth pulling that thread for a while. Katara, as a waterbender, is unusually attuned to the weather, to the moon, to the tides, to the small movements of water in everything around her. The show shows her noticing things other characters do not notice. The way a stream is running, the way the snow is falling, the way the rain shifts when a front is moving in. She is, in this sense, an ecological character. She belongs to the water of the world. And the philosophical claim that emerges from that attunement is the claim that paying close attention to the natural world is itself a kind of moral practice. The person who notices the weather is the person who notices the village in the distance. The person who notices the village is the person who notices the family by the road. The person who notices the family is the person who feeds the child. Attention is a single faculty, the show implies. The waterbender who can feel the tide is the same waterbender who can feel that something is wrong in the next room. Katara, by being so good at the first, is good at the second. The two competences are, in her, the same competence. And the show, by making this connection without commentary, suggests something quietly important about the moral life. The moral life is, at base, a life of attention. You cannot be ethical to people you have not noticed. You cannot help a world you're not paying attention to. The person who walks through the world half asleep cannot reliably do any of the work that the rest of her ethics calls for. Katara is awake. She's awake to the water, she's awake to the weather, and she is awake to the people. And it is one underlying capacity, performed in many directions at once. There is also her relationship to silence to consider. Katara, for all her passion, is one of the more comfortable silent characters in the cast. She does not, like Sokka, need to fill a silence with a joke. She does not, like Aang in his anxious moments, need to fill a silence with a question. She does not, like Toph, need to fill a silence with a jab. She can sit in a silence for a long time. She can let other people be in their own silences. She can read silences. She knows the difference between a silence of grief, a silence of thought, a silence of withholding, a silence of peace. The show, by writing her with this capacity for silence, gives her one of the most underrated tools of any moral agent. She can simply be present with somebody who is not yet able to speak. That is a major skill. Most adults cannot do it. Children, especially, rarely have it. Katara, by the end of the series, has it down. The philosophy hiding underneath that capacity is the philosophy that the work of ethics is sometimes the work of staying in the room without insisting on speech. The grieving person, the angry person, the frightened person, the ashamed person, all of them sometimes need somebody to sit with them and not require them to perform anything. Katara is, again and again, the person who does that. She does it for Aang, she does it for Sokka, she does it for Zuko, eventually. She does it for any number of strangers, in any number of small scenes the show throws away as background. And the silence she offers, the steady silence of somebody who is paying attention and is not going to leave, is one of the most powerful gifts the show ever shows being given. The question of betrayal, since we have already touched on it in connection with Zuko, is worth coming back to in a wider way because Katara across the series is betrayed quite a lot. She is betrayed by Jet, who turns out to be something different than what he sold himself as. She is betrayed by Zuko in the catacombs. She is betrayed in smaller ways by various people across the road. And her response in each case tells you something about her philosophy. She does not, in the wake of betrayal, become a person who has stopped trusting. She becomes a person who trusts more carefully. She does not, in the wake of betrayal, decide that everybody is going to do the same thing. She decides that this particular person did this particular thing, and she updates her view of them. She does not, in the wake of betrayal, allow a single bad encounter to harden her against the possibility of future good ones. That is, again, a hard and considered philosophical move. The cheap response to betrayal is to become cynical. The mature response is to stay open while sharpening your discernment. Katara does the mature response. The show, by writing her this way, makes a real philosophical claim about cynicism. The claim is that cynicism is, in the end, a kind of laziness. It is what people do when they do not want the work of judging each new person on their own merits. Katara is not lazy in this way. She is willing, every time, to do the work. And it costs her occasionally when she misjudges, but it pays her over and over when she does not. The friends she makes by remaining open, including, eventually, Zuko, are friends she could not have made if she had hardened. And the show, by giving her so many friends in the end, is implicitly endorsing the bet she has made on remaining open. The episode early in Book 1 involving the waterbending scroll is worth a long pause, because it is the moment the show first gives you her capacity for moral compromise, and it is the moment she first has to confront her own willingness to bend her own rules. The group, while on the road, encounters pirates who have a waterbending scroll. Katara wants the scroll badly. She has been waiting all her life for any kind of formal instruction. The pirates will not sell it to her at a price she can afford, and she steals it. She slips out at night, takes the scroll, and brings it back to the camp. Sokka, when he finds out, is horrified, partly because she has stolen and partly because she has put the group at risk. The episode then becomes a chase. The pirates come after them, the group barely escapes. The scroll, in the end, is theirs, but the cost has been higher than they expected, and Katara has to sit with the fact that her desire for instruction overrode her usual ethics. The show, by writing the episode this way, is doing something philosophically subtle. It is letting her be wrong in a way that is recognizably hers. It is not letting her be wrong about strangers. It is letting her be wrong because she wanted something for herself badly enough to take it from somebody else, even though the somebody else was a bad person. And it is then letting her sit with the small unease of having done it. The episode does not end with a clean apology. It ends with her keeping the scroll and using it to train. The compromise has stuck. The moral question has not been cleanly answered. And the show, by leaving it unanswered, makes a real philosophical claim about her. It says that even the people who are mostly ethical have things they want badly enough to bend their own rules for, and that the test of an ethical person is not whether they ever bend, but what they do with the bend afterwards. Katara, by going on to use the scroll responsibly, by going on to be a more careful person about taking what is not hers, demonstrates the answer. She metabolized the lesson. She did not pretend she had not learned it. And the show, by quietly leaving the episode behind without harping on it, treats that as enough. Her relationships with the other young women in the show are worth examining because they form a small constellation of contrast against which her philosophy can be seen more clearly. There is Suki, the leader of the Kyoshi warriors, who meets the group in the early episodes and becomes, by the end of Book 3, Sokka's partner and a member of their wider circle. There is Toph, whom we have discussed. There is Yue, whom we have discussed. There is Tai Li, the cheerful acrobat who travels with Azula, and who, by the end of the series, has been shown joining the Kyoshi warriors. There is Mai, the bored and graceful knife thrower whom the show eventually shows breaking from Azula to side with Zuko. And there is Azula herself. The space these women occupy around Katara is varied. Some of them are her friends, some of them are her enemies. Some of them, over the course of the show, become both in turn. What is striking about her conduct toward all of them in the show is the consistency of her recognition. She sees them as people first. She recognizes, even in her enemies, the structural reasons for their lives. She does not dismiss Mai as a Fire Nation princess's tag-along. She does not dismiss Tai Li as a circus performer. She sees Azula in the final duel as somebody whose breakdown is partly the consequence of her family. The show implies, by writing her this way, that her philosophy of seeing extends across the line of conflict. She can fight a woman whose life she also understands. She can refuse to dehumanize an enemy without being naive about the danger of the enemy. That, again, is hard. It is a higher moral standard than most adults manage in real war. The show, by giving it to a 14-year-old girl, is essentially arguing that the standard is available to anyone willing to do the daily work of being honest. Katara does the work. She refuses again and again to let the people on the other side of the war turn into a category in her head. They remain people. The category remains political. She acts accordingly. Her relationship with Suki in particular is a quiet pleasure of the show. The two of them meet briefly in Book 1 when the group lands on Kyoshi Island. Suki is the leader of the local warriors. She is older than Katara by a small but visible margin. She is competent, calm, generous, and a real fighter. The show, even in those early episodes, frames the meeting between them as a small recognition. Two competent young women raised in different traditions see each other across the courtyard and treat each other with respect. When Suki rejoins the group in Book 3, after her time as a prisoner, the relationship deepens. They share quiet conversation. They support each other in the larger plan. They are, in the final episodes, fighting on the same airship. And what is interesting is that the show does not write any rivalry between them, even though both of them are romantically involved with members of the central friend group. There is no jealousy, there is no spike of petty competition. There is only the steady warmth of two women who, in the universe the show describes, recognize each other as the kind of people who keep showing up. The philosophical claim implicit in that warmth is the claim that the assumption of female rivalry is a lazy assumption, and that the women who actually have to do the heavy work of the world tend to be the ones least interested in tearing each other down because they need each other too much. Katara and Suki, by being friends across the whole series, embody that. It is, in its own quiet way, one of the most progressive choices the show ever makes. It is also worth saying, because the show is doing this work whether or not it ever names it, that Katara is the show's most sustained argument against the idea that the moral labor of a story is gendered. The show could have written her as the sister who cooks and reminds and frets, and assigned the heroic moral arcs to its male characters. Many shows would have done exactly that. The show instead gives her the heroic moral arcs. The Southern Raiders is in many ways the most morally serious episode of the entire series, and it belongs to her. The Painted Lady is one of the cleanest statements of ethical autonomy the show has, and it belongs to her. The Hama episode is the darkest moral interrogation of any character, and it belongs to her. The duel with Pakku, the duel with Azula, the rescue of Aang in the catacombs, the protection of Aang at the Western Air Temple, all of them belong to her. And meanwhile, she is also doing the cooking, the comforting, the holding of the group, the small daily things that she also takes seriously. The show is, in effect, making the philosophical case that the assumption that those two sets of labors are different sets is a wrong assumption. They are the same labor, performed in different scales. The person who can hold a friend through a sob is the same person who can hold a country through a war. The work is continuous. The arena changes. Katara, by being given both arenas, demonstrates the continuity. And the philosophical claim that emerges is one of the cleanest the show makes. The claim is that the world has been wasting half its moral talent for centuries by deciding that the people who do the small daily labor cannot also do the large historical labor. The show, by giving Katara both, gestures at how much more world would be available if that prejudice were finally let go. The wider canon, in the comics and in Legend of Korra, as we have already discussed with care, then takes that argument and lets it play out across a longer life. The Katara who appears in Legend of Korra is not a Katara whose philosophy has changed. She is a Katara whose philosophy has been at work for many decades. She is still in the South. She is still teaching. She is still healing. She is, by then, also a widow, and the loss of Aang, even though it happens off-screen, is one of the quiet weights she carries through the few scenes she has in Korra's story. The philosophical claim, implicit in those few scenes, is that the same person can do the same work in different forms across an entire lifetime, and that the work does not become smaller for being old. Old Katara in Korra is still doing the next available kindness. She is still telling the truth as she sees it. She is still helping a young person find her way through her own bending and her own grief. And the show, by writing her this way, is essentially closing the argument it began in the first episode of the original series. The argument was that this character would last. The Korra material says, in effect, that the argument was correct. She did last. She is here decades later doing the same things, only more carefully, with the wisdom of having done them for a long time. It is fair to say that what the comics and Korra do not give us, and what fans have therefore filled in for themselves in various ways, is the texture of her life in between. The decades between the end of the war and the start of Korra are mostly off-screen. We get glimpses, we do not get a full picture. And the temptation for an essay like this would be to fill in the picture. The honest move is to refuse. The honest move is to say that the canon as it stands gives us enough to describe her philosophy, and that anything more would be invention, however well-meaning. We can say that she stayed, we can say that she raised her children, we can say that she taught new generations, we can say that she helped rebuild her tribe. We cannot, without speculation, say much more than that, and we do not need to. The philosophy she carried as a teenager is the same philosophy she carried as an old woman. The shape of the life between the two is hers to know and ours to imagine without claiming. The last thing worth saying before we begin the slow turn toward the close is something about the way her philosophy reads, in our own time, to people who have come to the show late. The original series aired in the middle of the 2000s, when a great many of the people who now love it were not yet born, or were too young to watch it carefully. Those people have, in the years since, come to her through streaming, through clips, through long-form video essays, through the rewatches their older friends have urged on them. And the recurring response in those new readers of the character is a kind of surprised respect. They expected a younger sister character. They expected a love interest. They expected a moral support pillar. They found instead a thoroughly worked-out moral agent with a coherent philosophy of life. That gap between the expectation and the find is, I think, part of why the discussion of her keeps refreshing every few years. People keep coming to her newly and being struck by what they had not been told to expect. The show, by giving her this much depth, gave her a slow burn afterlife in the culture that many other characters from the same era do not have. She continues to be read, she continues to be argued about. She continues to grow, in a sense, in the minds of the people who keep coming to her. And the philosophy she carries, the philosophy of stepping forward, of refusing to become what hurt you, of attention as the basic moral discipline, has held up in a way that some of the more glamorous philosophies of more glamorous characters have not. People still need her ideas. The show keeps giving them to people, decades after it ended. That, in its own modest way, is one of the highest compliments any character can earn. Try to draw all of this together into a single statement of her philosophy as a system, because the elements we have been describing are not separate principles. They are facets of the same underlying view. At the center of that view is a claim about what people are. Katara in the show seems to operate on the conviction that people are essentially relational. They are not, in her philosophy, atoms with attached histories. They are the ongoing sum of their relationships with other people, with their land, with the dead they remember, with the children they are responsible for. The self, in her view, is a knot of obligations and connections, and the work of being a person is the work of tending that knot. From that central conviction, everything else follows. The ethics of hospitality follows. Because if people are essentially relational, then feeding the stranger is not charity, it is maintenance of the world. The ethics of attention follows. Because if people are essentially relational, then noticing them is not optional, it is the basic act on which everything else depends. The ethics of grief follows. Because if people are essentially relational, then the loss of a person leaves a real and lasting gap in the knot, and pretending it does not is the same thing as pretending the person did not matter. The ethics of forgiveness, where she gives it, follows, because the goal of forgiveness in her view is not to clean the past, but to repair the future shape of the knot. The ethics of restraint, where she practices it, follows, because the harm she could do with her bending is harm to the same knot she is trying to tend. Everything fits, every piece reinforces every other piece. The system is, in this sense, unusually coherent for a character in a children's adventure show. And it is coherent not because she has read books about ethics, but because she has lived a life in which the relational view of personhood was the only view that made sense. She was raised by a grandmother in a village that had been reduced almost to nothing. The relational view in such a village is not philosophy. It is survival. You tend the knot or there is no village. That coherence is part of why, when she is tested, she holds. She is not switching between principles. She is applying a single principle again and again in different conditions. When she sees Yon-Ra in the rain, she is applying it. When she meets Pakku in the north, she is applying it. When she dances at the Fire Nation school, she is applying it. When she heals Aang in the Spirit Oasis water, she is applying it. The variety of her actions in different situations conceals an underlying unity. She does not have to think very hard in any given situation about what to do, because the situation is just another instance of the same problem. The problem is, what does the knot of relationships in this room require me to do next? And the answer, almost always, comes quickly. Help the village. Defy the master. Spare the man. Heal the friend. Hold the boy. Bury the past. Dance with the children. The variety is in the actions. The principle is one. And the show, by giving her 3 books to keep applying the same principle in fresh situations, demonstrates that the principle scales. It works at the level of a single conversation. It works at the level of a war. It works at the level of an old woman teaching a new avatar. the same principle all the way through. The companion philosophies in the show, the philosophies of the other major characters, can be read as variations on or contrasts with hers. Aang's philosophy, the philosophy of the air nomads as he received it, is a philosophy of non-attachment and of universal compassion. It is broader than hers. It is, in a sense, more abstract than hers. Katara's relational view is rooted in particular people, in particular villages, in the particular weight of her mother's necklace. Aang's view is more cosmic. He loves all sentient life. He cannot, by his own ethics, kill the Fire Lord. The show, by pairing them, makes a careful argument about the way these two views need each other. Aang's compassion, without her particularity, can drift into a kind of holy vagueness. Her particularity, without his compassion, can risk becoming partisan. Together they are nearly complete. They are the universal and the local, the wide and the close, the abstract and the rooted. The show's romance between them is, in this reading, not just emotional, it is philosophical. The two of them are completing each other's ethics. The fact that they end up together is the show's way of saying that the best piece, the durable one, is the one that includes both views at once. Zuko's philosophy, which the show develops over 3 books, is a different kind of contrast. Zuko begins the show as a person who has been taught that honor is given by the powerful and can be revoked by the powerful, and that the highest moral act is the recovery of the honor his father has taken from him. By the end, he has rebuilt the entire concept from the ground up. He has come to understand honor as a thing internal to a person, given by no one, revocable by no one but the person themselves. Katara, by being a moral witness to that rebuilding, is one of the people who helps him recognize that what he has been calling honor was actually obedience. Her view, the relational view, has no use for the kind of solitary transcendent honor his father taught him. Her view is about the work that gets done between people, and the trust that gets built between people, and the responsibilities people take on for each other. Zuko, in coming to understand her view, comes to understand a version of honor his nation has never given him language for. That is a quiet, real piece of his arc, and it is a piece that comes, in part, from his having spent so much time around her in the second half of Book 3. He does not learn it from Aang, he does not learn it from Toph, he learns it from her. The philosophical claim that emerges from that is the claim that her view, once you have seen it operate, is contagious. It teaches itself, it modifies the people who come near it, and it modifies them in the direction of better behavior. That is, again, a serious philosophical claim for the show to make. It is essentially the claim that her philosophy is the right one. The show is willing to make that claim. By the end of Book 3, the show has made it. Iroh, as we have already discussed, is the other major adult moral figure, and his philosophy, in its softer way, is a philosophy of the long view, of slow growth, of forgiveness. It is, in many ways, the closest adult mirror her philosophy has in the cast. Iroh would have understood her completely, and the show and its small scenes between them implies that he does. The exchange of a few words, the gentle look from across a room, the way he treats her at the Western Air Temple, all suggest a mutual recognition between the two of them. They have come to similar conclusions by very different routes. He is an old man who has lost a son. She is a girl who has lost a mother. Their philosophies have converged on the same principle, that the war must end without producing more people who think like the people who started it. The show, by giving them this quiet alignment, suggests something important about that principle. The principle is available across age and culture. The principle is what serious people in this universe arrive at when they have done the work. And the principle is the principle on which any future peace will have to be built. Toph's philosophy, in the comic relief and the friction of her presence, is also worth a brief look in this context. Toph believes, more or less, in honesty over kindness, in directness over courtesy, in being undeniably yourself at all times. She is the opposite of disguised. She is, in many ways, the opposite of polite. And Katara, while sometimes exasperated by her, comes to admire her for it. The show, by writing the two of them as friends, makes a subtle point about the relationship between honesty and care. The point is that they are not enemies. The point is that Toph's blunt honesty and Katara's caring presence are both genuine expressions of love for the people around them, and that the assumption that care must look soft and that honesty must look harsh is a bad assumption. Katara can be honest, Toph can be caring. They each do both in their own way. And the friendship between them by the end of the series is a real friendship between two real moral agents, each of whom has learned to value the other's way of doing the same underlying work. Sokka finally holds a slightly different position in the moral architecture of the show. Sokka is the practical one, he is the planner, he is the strategist, he is the brother who, more than the rest of the group, thinks about logistics. His philosophy, insofar as he has one, is a philosophy of getting things done in the world as it actually is. He is not, in the early going, very interested in the spirit world. He is, in the early going, occasionally dismissive of bending in a way that gets gently corrected over the course of the series. By the end, he has integrated the various views of the people around him. He has accepted the spiritual seriousness of the world. He has accepted his sister's competence as a bender. He has become, in his own right, a serious, tactical, and even philosophical agent. And the relationship between him and Katara, through all of this, is the longest-standing relationship in the series. They argue, they tease each other, they occasionally hurt each other, they never abandon each other. And the philosophy that emerges from their relationship, the philosophy that the bond between siblings is durable in a way other bonds may not be, is one of the quiet anchors of the show. Katara is who she is in part because Sokka is in the room. He is who he is in part because she is. They have grown up together. They have, in effect, been making each other for years. And the relational view of personhood that she carries is, in a real sense, supported by the fact that she has been in this particular relationship her entire conscious life. If you had to name her single largest philosophical claim, the one all the others depend on, it would be the claim we already started with. The claim that you do not have to become the thing that hurt you. That claim, made in the rain by a 14-year-old girl over the body of the man who killed her mother, is the moral nucleus of the entire show. It is the claim that the cycle of violence is breakable. It is the claim that the world that comes after the war does not have to be the same shape as the world that produced the war. It is the claim, finally, that an individual person, by refusing to take the easy path of revenge, can become a small but real piece of the change. Katara is not the only person in the show who makes that claim. Aang makes it in a different way when he spares the Fire Lord. Iroh makes it in a different way when he refuses to break Ba Sing Se. Zuko makes it in a different way when he turns on his father. But Katara makes it in the most ordinary, most undramatic, most personal way possible. She makes it with her hand half lifted, the water already shaped, the man on his knees, and she lowers her hand. The whole show, in a sense, has been building toward that moment, and the whole show, after that moment, is the small confirmation that the moment was true. The peace that comes is the peace she made room for in the rain when she did not strike. In the end, the philosophy of Katara is not a list of principles. It is a way of moving through the world. It is the way of moving that says you slow down for the village in front of you, even if the larger mission is waiting. It is the way of moving that says you do not let the worst thing that has ever happened to you write the rest of your behavior. It is the way of moving that says you hold the small people in the room and you stand up to the large ones. It is the way of moving that says you keep practicing hope as if it were a martial art, even when the conditions for hope are bad. It is the way of moving that says you accept your own grief without letting it dictate your conduct. It is the way of moving that says you remain open to the next person who walks into your life, even though you have been hurt before. It is, in short, the way of moving that says the world is worth being kind to, even though the world has not always been kind back. The show, by giving us 3 books in the company of somebody who lives this way, gives us a long, patient picture of what that way of moving actually looks like. It is not perfect. It is not always glamorous. It is sometimes very hard. It is also possible. Katara, by being possible, makes the philosophy possible for the viewer too. That last claim is, I think, the deepest reason the character has lasted. Many shows give you a heroic protagonist who lives by some principle that, in any honest reading, none of us could actually live by. Katara is not that. She is, in fact, ordinary in ways the show is careful to keep noticing. She gets tired, she makes mistakes. She is sometimes wrong about people. She sometimes snaps at the people she loves. And she is, despite all of this, by the end of 3 books, somebody you can imagine becoming. Her philosophy is one a real person could practice, in our real world, in our real years, with our real limitations. You could, if you wanted to, take her view of personhood, and her view of grief, and her view of forgiveness, and her view of attention, and apply them in your own life, on your own scale, in your own city, in your own family. You would not be a waterbender, you would not be in a 100-year war. You would, however, be doing the same work in the same general direction. That, perhaps more than anything else, is why she has stayed in the cultural conversation as long as she has. She has given 2 generations of viewers now a working model of what an ethical life under conditions of grief and conflict and exhaustion might actually look like. She has done it without preaching. She has done it without explaining. She has done it mostly by showing up. And so we sit at the end of 3 books and a wider canon and a sequel series, with a character whose philosophy can be summarized in a sentence, and whose practice of that philosophy can take a whole essay to describe. The sentence is something like, tend the knot of people you are part of, and refuse, however the world treats you, to become the thing that hurt you. The practice is the whole rest of her life. The show, in its 3 books, gave us the early version. The comics, in their slower way, gave us a small extension. Legend of Korra, decades on in the timeline, gave us an old version still recognizably the same. The fans, in the years since, have done the rest of the work by carrying her view into their own conversations, their own essays, their own decisions about what to do when the world asks them, again, to become a worse version of themselves. She is a girl on a television show. She is also a small philosophical inheritance. The 2 things are, at this point, indistinguishable. That is what it looks like when a writer's room makes a character that lasts. That is what it looks like when an idea, set inside a child's adventure story, turns out to be one of the more useful ideas the genre has ever produced. That is, finally, what it looks like when somebody refuses to strike and walks away, and the world becomes very slightly more habitable for the rest of us. We have been at this for a long time, and you have been very kind to listen. There is something worth pausing on at the close, which is that the reason this character keeps coming back into our conversations, year after year, generation after generation, is that the world has not yet stopped offering people the option to become the thing that hurt them. The opportunity is always there. The justification is always available. Somebody has always done something to you or to somebody you love that would make a small cruelty in return seem completely fair. Katara, in the rain on the deck of the boat at the end of the Southern Raiders episode, is responding to a version of the question every person is sooner or later asked. The question is, given what you have suffered, what kind of person are you going to be next? Her answer, the answer the show built 3 books to give her room to give, was, not that one. Not the one who becomes a killer because she was made by killers. Not the one who learns to bloodbend because she was forced to bloodbend. Not the one who hardens because she was hurt. Some other answer, a more difficult answer, a more patient answer. The answer that says, the world has given me reason to be terrible, and I'm going to refuse the reason, and I'm going to be a person who tends a village and feeds a child and dances with the children in a school full of strangers, and braids her friend's hair, and kisses a boy outside a tea shop in Ba Sing Se. That is the answer. That is the entire philosophy, said out loud. And the show, by giving it to her in the rain, gave it to all of us in a form we could carry. The most lasting thing, Avatar, the last airbender ever made is, in the end, this one quiet decision in the dark, by a young woman who had every right to do otherwise. To do otherwise anyway. Avatar will be on the air in one form or another, for a long time yet. People will keep coming to it. They will keep finding her. They will keep being surprised, the way the rest of us were surprised, that the small, busy sister character at the start turned out to be the moral heart of one of the most thoughtful adventure stories ever made for children. They will, with luck, take a little of her with them. The world is the better for the times when somebody does. Sleep well if you can. Thank you sincerely for letting Ember keep you company tonight. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.